Hi, I'm Matthias. This is an Ian McCullum, and this is a May. You probably know that one. This one's not so recognizable, but what you all should know is this is a Browning automatic rifle. Although we've already covered an episode on this guy. He's one of 7 light machine gun / automatic rifles that we have managed to lay our hands on thanks to, well, a lot of hard work, a lot of cash, and a little bit of sponsorship from Brownells. More on that later, but everybody go say thanks to Brownells right now for putting these people in the same room. Now, if you're coming into this from some weird vector, I am the host of c&rsenal. This is the host of Forgotten Weapons and occasional star of In Range. And we have today a large project to cover all of the light machine guns of World War I. Now, before anybody complains, there is possibly one notable exception. I'm going to get it Fedorov off tonight.
Yeah, we don't have the Fedorov. Nobody has the Fedorov that's willing to shoot it.
Yeah, and did anybody really have the Fedorov to any significant number to the degree that we're...
No.
So we have the issued light machine guns of the war. It's a very complete list. So join us today as we sit down, dig in, and light up all 7, and then give our assessment of just how they perform.
So what we're looking to do here is create a whole series of tests to assess how these guns actually performed in World War I from a modern perspective. So we're going to be looking at everything from walking fire and magazine dumping from the hip, to long-range accuracy, to field stripping, to reloading, to if you set up a large number of targets, how many can you hit in a fixed time period with every single one of these guns? And we're going to have all 3 of us actually doing these tests. So we have a range of experience and skill and body type to find out how do they all work.
Honestly, it's great that we have that not only the range of tests for the guns, but with different range of shooters, because that's really going to give everyone a good rounded perspective on each gun. No, not anything is going to be biased because we're not all the same type of person. They're not all the same type of gun. So really, I think we're going to get a lot of interesting results.
Yeah, this should be pretty fascinating. I think if you don't know us from our previous work, I am a large man who sits behind a computer and learns things about guns. Ian here is another gun expert who also has had much more time on the range. And then May is actually a woman. So
I checked.
I think that checks a box for us, but otherwise she does do all the demonstration for our show and has handled probably more specifically World War I firearms than most people. I don't know that there are people out there that have handled more
Probably
down
not.
to the weeds individual shoulder or hand arms from that period. So
Yeah,
it's quite possible. It's hard to think about that, but I also handle them very carefully and in control. Like it's never any rapid sort of situations. It's always a very
that is true. We are going to see the difference between a curated shooter and a competition style shooter. This would be pretty interesting.
you know what? I can't think of any place in any media format where anyone has ever done something like this with all of these guns.
No.
not all at once.
You can occasionally find people doing a couple, like the BAR versus the Chauchat, or the Maxim versus the Chauchat, or the Maxim and
let's
the
be
BAR.
honest, it's usually just some quick demo shot.
And it's usually scripted too, pre-scripted.
They already have decided where it's going to go, which is generally American exceptionalism. So I tell you what, let's just go ahead and tell you what guns you're dealing with so that you can pick your favorite and then ultimately find out what we picked as ours.
Hotchkiss Mark I. The Hotchkiss Portative, or model of 1909, was a radically lightened version of the 55-pound model 1900. While it was adopted by several great powers and used by teams of soldiers, especially by British cavalry, it's more commonly seen on period aircraft and even tanks. and our model today is specifically designed to favor vehicle use.
All right, so we have the Hotchkiss Portative. Not the most ergonomic gun in the bunch. I mean, I don't know. All of us have played with one at one point or another. I don't know how much range time. I think you handled one years ago. But I don't have high hopes. The fire rate's higher than I expected on those guns. That springy feed strip just feels like I'm going to dump around. And if I dump around, it's going to interrupt fire. So I don't have high hopes for it. I'd put it somewhere in the middle of the pack.
I'm pretty sure it's going to be the worst gun that we have. I think it has basically no redeeming qualities. I think it's going to be very difficult to move with. I think that little crow's foot tripod is going to be very unstable to use. The gun is awkward to handle. It's going to be one of the more difficult ones to fire from the hip. The sights are tiny, and I suspect the movement on firing from the tripod is going to make it very difficult to actually hit anything.
Yeah, I feel like, especially like running and gunning with that thing and like putting it down on the ground, it's going to be really difficult to settle that gun. And as far as getting everything lined up, it's going to be a bit of a challenge, I will imagine. It's supposed to be pretty portable, but I don't think it's going to be an easy one for us to handle.
Yeah, you in particular said you don't seem to care for the sights.
No. They definitely look god awful. So goodness knows how that's going to go for accuracy on range.
In terms of form, I think the sights look normal enough to me, and when I'm sitting perfectly still with them, I can line them up, but it's just such a shallow V-notch for what's supposed to be a moving piece of equipment.
When that thing starts to have recoil, those sights are just going to completely disappear.
Yeah.
Browning Automatic Rifle, 1918. John Browning whipped this handy darling up during the war. It was meant to give an advancing infantryman overwhelming firepower, suppressing the enemies in their trenches as the ultimate walking fire weapon. It saw extremely limited use with U.S. infantry at the very end of the war. You know, guys, I've actually handled the BAR before, so it's not something I'm unfamiliar with. Granted, I've never done some of the extra stuff we're going to be doing with these guns, so that is going to be a bit of a different experience, like no bipod on this one, so laying down with this, it's going to be a little bit difficult. I mean, how do y'all think?
I wish this gun had a bipod. I think if you put a bipod on this, that wasn't the awful World War II bipod. I think if you put a decent bipod on the BAR, it would easily be the best gun out there, even given that it's going to be relatively limited magazine capacity. Those mags are relatively slow to change. They're small. They're the smallest magazine we have on any of these guns. However, the gun is mechanically fantastic. It's simple to operate. It's effective. It's accurate. The sights are fantastic on it. I think it's going to be towards the top, and I think it's going to be limited primarily by the lack of a bipod.
Yeah, I'm not like an American exceptionalist on this kind of stuff, and I really actually tend to try to throw more light on the European innovations. But American ergonomics really tend to be pretty good at this period. Like it feels like maybe it's just more experience with frontier culture or handling firearms personally, but there's a lot of investment in that doesn't feel right. This should feel right. And so the one thing I might struggle with on the BAR is it feels so modern, and yet there's some things like that magazine release inside the trigger guard. I feel like you're going to catch me slipping because I'm going to start reaching for a standard magazine release position because it's such a modern feeling gun. However, I agree. I've never had problems getting an arm up and under on a prone position. So as long as it balances well like that, I might not even miss the bipod because, as you said, the bipods are so terrible in World War I. What am I really losing out on?
And this time, as far as mobility goes, we're not going to have that belt cup to latch it onto, so that's going to be a little bit difficult when we're actually maneuvering with it, like a step fire setup. Yeah,
that's actually something important to cover. We are not using any extraneous accessories on these guns, so no special sling for the Lewis gun or the MG0815, no belt cup for the BAR. All these guns in some form or another had some adaptation during the war, but we're going pure naked because we were unable to put together every possible combination of these things.
Honestly, I don't think the belt cup is a benefit.
Really?
No, I think I'd rather shoot it without.
Okay. We're going to see how this goes out. I'm actually really curious. CSRG, 1915. Chauchat, Sutter, Riberoy, and Gladiator, the names behind the most easily produced automatic in our series. These guns may have come across as downright crude, but they were light, maneuverable, and extremely effective, when the crew knew how to care for them properly and had the time to keep them in service.
In some ways, I think the 8mm Chauchat is going to be one of the best guns. Primarily, its portability. It's light, it's handy, it's easy to move with. The problem is, it's a very difficult gun to shoot accurately. Just the the harmonics of that bolt cycling, the amount of felt recoil that it has. People are going to expect it to be unreliable, but I think it will run just fine. I think the problem we will have with it is actually making hits. It's good to move with. It's not that hard to get in position with. The bipod's tall. The bipod's not good. None of these bipods are good. But it's better on real terrain than it is on just a perfectly flat range.
Yeah, I've been told that, like, basically line up your sights first and foremost with that gun, but then after that, just watch where the dirt splatter hits at that point.
I think one of the keys to firing a Chauchat effectively is very short bursts, or even almost treat it like a semi-auto rifle.
Which, by the way, is much more of its design anyway. It's the Chauchat like the BAR, and we didn't say this before, but the Chauchat like the BAR is another gun that's really not entirely designed specifically for walking fire, but it was much more thought of as this is going to be a shoot and move automatic rifle / automatic. Whereas when we see some of the other guns that we have in this field, they're treated as lightened machine guns first and foremost. So we may see some strong benefit out of what are essentially automatic rifles or close to automatic rifles. For the Chauchat, for me, again, I think it's a gun that's been, wildly misunderstood. It was definitely a gun that was designed to be produced at a time when it needed production. So there's some things that don't work well on it. It's not the most ergonomic design. There's some compromises in there. But one that's set up well, and Mark over at Anvil Gunsmithing has been working on this one to make sure it's going to run for us, and cleaning up the magazines, which was another vulnerability point. So in this condition, we should see some good performance out of it. But the one thing that stands out to me is I cannot get my head behind those sights. And we have the one with the modified sight so that it's easier to get your head behind it. And my fat head still has a hard time. So I don't know how well I'm going to do with this thing.
Well, one way to find out.
Madsen, 1914. The Danish Madsen was among the very first light machine guns, with defining patents dating back to 1901. It uses a rising breech block, not unlike the Martini-Henry single-shot rifles. While many powers had handfuls of Madsens, photographic evidence puts them in more common use with Austria-Hungary and even Germany, both purchasing what they could before Denmark cut them off.
So I think I'm the only one that has any real experience with this Madsen because I had to test it to get it set up to actually take out to the range. And it was missing a part. Mark has manufactured a part for us, again, over at Anvil Gunsmithing. And it's running, and as long as that part holds out, and this is very much a almost kludge, we should be fine. This is a very early Madsen. It appears to be a 1914 pattern with a very specific set for feed and stop. And I'm going to tell you, I don't know what to get out of it. As long as the feed runs, as long as it keeps feeding ammo, I expect it to be one of our top performers. It's very light. It's very portable. This one is chambered in 7mm Mauser, which is a very nice cartridge for this kind of thing. And was probably used by the Austrians because they had Mausers in 7mm. And from photos I've seen, they had the same magazine curvature. So I'm thinking this is what they had, is the 7mm Mausers. So I have high hopes for it. But again, we could have some jamming.
Yeah, I mean, Ian, you have shot like a newer one. Like I think I saw a video of yours a while back on that, so I know you've got some experience in this. But I'm the one who's going to have basically the fresh eyes on it. I've seen it fire, but never actually experienced it myself. Honestly, I'll be curious to see how it performs. I do agree. It looks like it's going to be one of the most mobile ones, but will it be more mobile than maybe like the Chauchat or something like that? I think the Chauchat is coming out a little bit lighter on that one, so we'll see how this one performs.
I have very high hopes for the Madsen. I think it's going to be one of the top contenders here. As long as the gun continues to work reliably, which is kind of one of the things with the Madsen, is it's this very strange internal mechanism. And when it works great. And when it malfunctions, you kind of throw it away and get a new gun. Not quite, but close. I think the sights are relatively good. In my situation, I like the fact that even though it has a top-mounted magazine, the sights are centerline on the gun. So you don't have to try it, if you're left-handed, you don't have to try and lean over the gun or shoot it on your weak side. You can shoot that thing left-handed just as easily as someone can shoot it right-handed. The magazines are easy to change. I'm curious how the bipod will handle, both with it's hinged, it hinges back towards the gun, and also just the height of the bipod. A lot of these bipods seem to be relatively tall for our preferences today. Yeah,
the funny thing about this Madsen is, and we're probably not going to use it, that bipod is extendable so that you can shoot it from a seated position with a bipod out to here, and it just clicks out. Now, we're probably not going to make use of that, but it's wild that they thought, it might be sat behind a log, and I'll use it in this configuration, but it's super cool.
There's a great photo I've seen of a Dutch colonial Madsen with like a 14-inch barrel or something and a bipod like that, and they're shooting it in this grass that's waist high. And that bipod allowed them to get it above the grass.
Yeah, it's a cool design. I will say it looks like some of the wartime ones had spring clips, and we didn't manage to replicate one of those. So we're going to have some bipod waggle that they might not have had in the war, but I don't think it's going to make a big difference.
I'm excited for this one.
Lewis gun, Mark I. The Lewis gun had been rejected at home in the United States, but the British and Belgians saw potential. These guns use an aluminum radiator, which along with a shroud, use the blast of each shot to pull in cool air, enabling longer bursts of fire before overheating. So really the Lewis gun, out of all the ones that we have there, I feel like is going to be the most accurate gun, because I remember shooting that one on range and it just drilled a hole. Like, it was one of the most stable machine guns I have handled to date once you sink that bipod in. Now, granted, how it's going to do in terms of maneuverability, I feel like that one's going to be a bit awkward because we don't really have any sling to accompany us with that one. So I feel like in terms of for laying down with that one, it's going to be great. But for everything else, it's going to come up probably like middle ground, I want to say.
The Lewis is heavy. It's got pretty good sights. It's got a bipod that's awful, but not really any more awful than anything else that we're working with. It's got a relatively large magazine capacity compared to a lot of our other guns. And I think it's going to be far from the worst.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's the long range sight, the Lewis feels really good to me. I can aim at distance with the Lewis gun. I feel like finding and acquiring that sight, and this is something we had a conversation about before, it's a little odd. You don't naturally draw the sight, so there's going to be a little hesitation there. It's definitely very unwieldy, but to May's point, it has probably the most linear recoiling system out of this bunch off the top of my head. Well, the Chauchat is very linear, but it also has that double impulse. So like, this is a single impulse, very linear rotating unlocking force. Like, this feels like it's a very stable gun once you get it up and running.
And the weight of the gun is going to help in controlling it when you're firing.
Right.
I think the only thing heavier than this that we're working with is the Maxim. And the bipod on the Lewis is definitely better than the bipod on the Maxim.
Oh yeah, big time.
Oh, another point, very high magazine capacity compared to some of the others. Most of these we've been talking about are in the 15 to 20 range, and now we're talking about a gun, or 30 with the Hotchkiss Portative.
Yeah.
But we're talking about a stable drum of 47 rounds. Assuming no misfeeds, though, that thing is terrible to clear once it's jammed.
Right.
CSRG, 1918. The model 1918 is nearly identical to its precursor and was simply created to arm the American Expeditionary Force with something chambered in their own 30-06 cartridge. The guns were poorly received and earned a bad reputation. For the most part, they were kept only for training purposes.
So the 30-06 Chauchat is basically identical to the 8mm one in most respects, except that it is actually distinctively more difficult to shoot. It has a harsher recoil impulse to it than the 8mm guns, which doesn't really, it doesn't seem like it ought to. The two cartridges in their World War I guys were really pretty darn similar, but it is a more difficult gun to shoot than the 8mm. The magazines on it are both smaller in capacity. They only hold 15 rounds instead of 18 to 20, and they're definitely more fragile. People think that the 30-06 Chauchat had a better magazine because it didn't have that open viewing window. In reality, the viewing window is a problem in the 8mm guns, but just the flimsy construction of the 30-06 magazines was a real problem. So I think it's going to be similar to the 8mm Chauchat, but worse.
Yeah, Mark actually had to do a lot of work over at Anvil Gunsmithing to get the magazines that we have on range for this, just to get them running. He had to do tons of hours of work on them just to get all the kinks out of them. And if you haven't seen his, I don't know when his video is coming out for that, but he does show a video of him actually trying to get all of them in working condition. So kudos for that. But yeah, I imagine this is going to be certainly an experience to have with it.
Yeah, for me, I've only put a couple test rounds through it just to make sure we had the ammo running right and just to check on your mags because they had just been repaired. And again, I get a taste that you haven't had, so you're probably the most disadvantaged on some of these systems.
Yeah, kind of.
But I'm going to tell you, man, working on a concrete floor with that gun, I could not arch my back enough to get, because the bipod is so tall in its natural state. Now, someone's assured me that it's much easier to use actually in position in the field, but for me, I felt like I was doing a yoga routine just to get behind the sights on that gun. So I'm not feeling as good about it. Although I will say for both the Chauchats, I like the slow rate of fire. It's actually very controllable.
MG 0815. Germany entered the war without a light machine gun in production. Development of a model capable of rapid mass production was a challenge, and so they simply lightened the traditional Maxim MG08, removing all unnecessary metal, slimming the water jacket, lightening most parts, and they topped it off with a swiveling bipod. The guns were so ubiquitous, in German language the term 0815 means generic, standard, run-of-the-mill. So, it's not going to be available yet for review because we just haven't made it public yet, but I have actually shot an 0815 before. We shot this way back when we were in Kentucky, so it's been quite a while. For me, that gun is incredibly heavy. It's going to be the heaviest one we have out there, and maneuverability with that is absolutely insane. Like, I actually have already tried walking fire with that one, and I felt like I was waddling like a duck just trying to handle it. So I've got my walk fire down now. I know how to do it properly, so there should be some improvement on that one, but it was still quite difficult. So not only that, but also laying it down, I just found that the bounce on that one is just, it's in a controlled range, definitely, but I was just up and down that target. I really was. So I feel like this one, well, it's going to have more rounds to it, so it's going to have technically more destructive power. I feel like it's not going to be as accurate as some of the other ones that just have more linear force with them. And also just moving with that one, especially with water in it, yeah, it's going to be a bit difficult.
Yeah, this is our only gun with dry and wet weight. Like, this is the only gun that has a range of weights available to it. And we'll probably sort of fill it up or let it down a little bit while we're on range. But I think we're going to try to really load up the weight while we're testing it on the range to see what you'd have to actually put up with this gun. But it is an awkward gun. As big as I am and as bulky as I am, it's still not comfortable. I have managed to hip fire one before, so I actually feel like I can do some damage. I will say, from my point of view, despite being the heaviest of the light machine guns, it does have the ability to pivot on its mount. It does have the largest ammo capacity by far and shares a standard sort of doctrine of arms with its bigger brother, so it's less training going into it if you're German. So there's some advantages there. It still just is an odd duck in this competition. Like, it stands out probably the furthest from any of the others.
Well, and there's good reason for that. It's really arguably not even a light machine gun at all. It's just taking the standard 08 Maxim and making it into something vaguely portable to move up with the troops. I think one of the biggest problems with this thing is going to be the bipod, because they have mounted it right in the center, and it's at this fulcrum point where every time you fire, the gun rocks back and forth on its bipod, which makes it very difficult to shoot accurately in bursts. And you see that in World War II when they actually started modernizing these for some rear echelon sort of use. They moved the bipod out to the muzzle. Even there, it's not great, but it's a little better. So I think in some tests, we're going to find the Maxim to be a clear winner because of its capacity and its reliability. That thing will just run ammo, just like the 08 Maxim that it's derived from. The problem is when it comes to moving with it, it's going to be absolutely behind everything.
Yeah, I can't wait to see you have to carry that thing, because you are at the most upper body disadvantage of this group.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. Like, I understand. Like, I'm going to be the weakest guy. Like, even if I were of, like, male gender, like, I'd still be the weakest dude of the group. So we're going to see how that goes. But, I mean, guys, I've been at the gym, like, a lot this past month. So we're going to see if that paid off.
You're a replica of a late war German soldier who hasn't had a proper meal in, like, 2 years.
I am a little hungry.
I've seen her eat a proper meal, though. All right, so I think that's got us set up for talking about these guys. We have our predictions in place, but let's see if we're right. We're going to hit the range and do some testing. This is going to be very intense for us, so wish us luck, because we don't know quite what we're getting into just yet, and you're going to find out very quickly, and it's going to take us several days to know. So let's go on, get us out to the range, and see what we can do with these guns.
All right.
I'm looking forward to it. This is going to be lots of fun. Hey guys, thank you very much for watching. We hope you really enjoyed this episode. If you would like to see the entire series put together as a single, long, contiguous documentary, you can get a copy of the entire thing for a nominal fee over at c&rsenal.com. All the proceeds from that go to funding this episode and making it possible for us to do another one in the future. If you enjoyed this episode also, please do thank Brownells. We are grateful for their participation and their help in making this possible. Brownells very much wants to work with our community in helping to preserve and maintain antique and historical firearms, as well as providing all manner of supplies for modern guns as well. And of course, stick around for the next episode, which is currently airing over on the C&rsenal channel. That is our 100-yard accuracy test.